Hello, welcome to my second railway film. My name is Malcolm Hales and what you're about to see is my video footage of railway operations in the Immingham area during the late 1980s and early 1990s. The port of Immingham, built by the Great Central Railway Company, employed thousands of railway workers. For today's retired workers, I hope this brings back many happy memories. However, some of the railway sidings would have changed a lot. The reduction in single load traffic during the 1970s had resulted in many railway lines being lifted. Empty sidings had closed and there was reduced activity at reception sidings and the eastern side of Immingham Dock. The creation of bulk and merry-go-round trains had resulted in most railway activity being centred around the western side of the dock and the oil refineries. However, I have split the footage. This is part one of two films. We begin at Immingham East Junction signal box. It was built by the Great Central Railway and opened on the 12th of October 1913. However, during the First World War, a Zeppelin bomber dropped an incendiary device, causing extensive damage and fatally injuring the signalman on duty. The signal box was rebuilt. It contains a pneumatic draw slide frame, and on the day of filming, resident signalman Brian Gold was on duty. The junction has 5 routes. At the bottom of the box diagram is the Grimsby and District Light Railway. The route to and from the eastern area of Immingham Dock are the double lines on the right. The grain store and Norse Hydro factory sidings are the double lines on the top right. Immingham traction depot lines are on the top left. And the main goods lines towards Humber Road are shown on the far left. The red electric token machine was used for working the single line of the Grimsby and District Light Railway to Pye-White Road. This is the view of the junction from the dock lines. The light railway is on the left, heading towards Queen's Road Bridge. This is the other side of the bridge. To its left was the route of the old Grimsby and Immingham electric tramway, leading towards Immingham Halt. As you can see, the tramway's overhead cable poles were still in place. The first siding on the light railway was the busy rail freight terminal. 2 siding lines led to a warehouse where the wagons loaded with export steel were placed for unloading. The cargo will be stored in the warehouse to await the arrival of a ship in the dock. On the day of filming, Immingham's travelling 08 pilot engine was returning to reception sidings, having placed a raft of steel wagons in the terminal. This view of the light engine was taken from the top of Queen's Road Bridge. As you can see, a double line of railway existed prior to the start of the single line towards Grimsby. From the other side of the bridge, the light engine can be seen passing Immingham East signal box towards the junction stop signal. Kill Lane level crossing was situated in Stallingborough near to Laporte siding, which closed to railways in 1973. The next siding towards Pywhite was Smallers. Based in Stallingborough, it had 2 tracks, one of which served a warehouse. It opened in 1987 for the storage of Saab motor cars. This view looking in the Immingham direction is of the ground frame handpoints. Back at East Junction, these are the inward and departure lines for the eastern side of Immingham Dock. Travelling towards the dock is a railway bridge. It's situated between the railway lines to the quays, which pass the weighbridge on the left, and King's Road railway lines on the other side. Prior to the beaching cuts of single load traffic during the 1960s, these lines would have been very busy. In the 1980s, however, they were little used, but very useful. Transit arrival and departure lines led towards number 1 and number 2 quays. Here is transit shed number 2 and 3 stabling sidings. This line leads to the quayside. The 3 lines on the left lead to number 2 shed and towards transit stabling sidings. The transit sheds were mainly used for mixed goods. However, with single load rail traffic in decline, they were hardly ever used by the railways. The whole area was surrounded by chemical and oil tank storage containers, some of which contain highly toxic chemicals. Most of the storage tanks were owned by Simon Storage Limited and had siding lines for loading block trains. Some of the wagons can be seen here. We are now looking from the signal box at the railway lines and ferry van wagons in the sidings of Norse Hydro. This company has set up a national distribution network of daily trains carrying shrink-wrapped bag fertiliser pellets to places such as Leith and Avonmouth. This is a train of empty ferry van fertiliser wagons passing over Immingham's Humber Road bridge, returning to East Junction for Norse Hydro. There were times when Norse Hydro sidings were full of wagons and the lines leading to the grain store were used for their storage.
Yeah.
The signalman at East Junction exchanges bell signals with the signalman at Immingham reception sidings for light engines to travel between the 2 boxes. He then sets the route for Locomotive 56094, seen here leaving Immingham Depot's departure line.
Right, we're with him in a minute.
The engine comes to a stand behind the crossover shunting disc signal outside the box. The signal is reversed and the driver then changes ends. The engine, which is to travel to the Immingham terminal to work a coal train to Scunthorpe, sets off onto the down goods main line towards Immingham reception signal box. This is the stopboard for engines departing the depot. The telephone underneath was used by engine drivers to advise the signalman of the engine's destination. The three stop signals on the same post were the departing signals for Norse Hydro, East Junction and the Grimsby and District Light Railway. Looking in the other direction from the departing signals is Immingham Locomotive Depot's washing plant. It was used by engines arriving into the depot after return of duty. The line heading towards the right, known as engine line, is used by engines from Immingham reception sidings. This is the diesel shed. It was used for servicing and maintaining diesel engines. At its rear is part of the old steam shed, which was mainly used for storing locomotives. The three-bay servicing part of the shed was commonly known as the daily end. On its right-hand side is the fueling point. This engine is being shunted to take in fuel for its next turn of duty. Passing a tank wagon at the fueling point are children heading towards the service bays. They were the children of the Boyden Centre, Immingham, who had been invited to the depot on one of the days I was recording. You will see them at various times throughout this film. This inspection pit is at the service end of the shed. This area was known as the high level. On the right is the stores facility and the shift foreman's office. Inside the office, computers were used by the shift foreman to keep service and maintenance records. These engines undergoing repair are in the maintenance zone of the shed. The depot accommodated locomotives for the rail freight train load sectors of petroleum, coal and metals. Most of this equipment seen here at the side of the office were access ladders used by fitters whilst working on the top of engines. The visitors are walking to below rail level to see work carried out by engineering staff underneath the engines. This engine is arriving into the maintenance end of the shed. A Class 60 engine, number 003, known as Christopher Wren, and 08751 pilot shunting engine stands on what was known as number 2 bogie shop line. The bogie shop building, seen here straight ahead, was where underframe and bogie cleaning was carried out. This engine, in the lifting position, was waiting the return of its bogie. These locomotives are stabled inside the carriage and wagon shops, which was part of the original steam shed. The 08 and the Class 60 were removed to other lines so as Immingham engineering staff could demonstrate to the Burt Boyden Centre children an emergency recovery vehicle's capabilities. This is the emergency recovery vehicle. It was known as a Bruff and was able to travel by road or rail to the site of a derailment or other such emergency. It carried workers and equipment and was used to re-rail rolling stock which had become derailed. In charge of the demonstration was Don McNabb in the blue overalls and John Britton in the long orange jacket. Immingham Depot also maintained a functional breakdown train with equipment for use in emergencies. Engineering staff demonstrate the vehicle's capabilities to the children of the Burt Boyden Centre. This young lad was operating the controls under instructions from John Britton whilst being watched by Jeff Johnson, the safety manager. The wagon was lifted and lowered to and from the rails by the use of jacks. These diesels, standing on the line known as Number 10 Road, were awaiting orders. The symbol on the side of this locomotive was known as the Star of the East. It represented Immingham Depot in the diesel era. In the steam days, the depot was known as 40B. The maintenance end of the diesel shed was known by train crews as the Immingham end. This locomotive, engine number 47380, named Immingham, is ferrying Bert, Boyd and children in the driver's cab for a short trip on Number 2 Road from the maintenance end of the shed to the dead end and return. The tall concrete structure in the background is the redundant mechanical coaling plant which provided steam engine tenders with coal. Viewed from the front cab of the locomotive, we take a return trip from the dead end to the diesel shed. On the left is the old steam shed. It was reduced in size when the diesel shed was built in 1966. It first became a carriage and wagon repair shed, but in the 1980s it was being used for the storage of locomotives. As we approach the diesel shed, you may notice a red flag and lamp standing in the forefoot of number 1 track. It was an indication to drivers that the line was out of use. Waiting for the arrival of the engine were children for the next trip. To ensure everything was done safely, train crew manager Carl Stanyard and depot manager John Britton, standing at the back, watched the locomotive return.
Get coal on the tender.
On this trip we view the vast area of land to the rear of the depot, including the unused mechanical coal plant, which became redundant when the diesel shed opened. The last steam locomotive to wait from here was engine number 61058 on the 7th of February 1966. At the controls were driver Les Merrills and fireman George Boulder.
I think they'll do a rain out actually later on again.
These tracks at the side of the fueling point were the departure sidings. Other sidings alongside the depot, known as Loco Yard, held wagons of material for the depot's use. They were situated next to the old Great Central's high-level lines, which opened in 1912 for supplying coal to the dock coal hoists. Rail underpasses for empty wagons were still in place, even though the coal hoist rails were lifted in 1971. This is the fixed signal for trains heading on the upwards main line towards Immingham East Junction. On the left is the locomotive depot and a better view of the redundant mechanical coaling plant. The pipes next to the main lines looking towards reception sidings contain oil for the oil refineries. On the right, in what was marshalling sidings, is the carriage and wagon depot for maintaining train sets of 100-ton tippler and HAA coal wagons. These train sets wait the Immingham Bulk Terminal to Scunthorpe services. The building on the left is the amenity block for train crews and maintenance staff. Inside were lockers for overalls and personal belongings, washing facilities and tables for taking food. There was also a train crew supervisor's office where crews would sign on and off duty and receive instructions from the supervisor. Late notice cases, seen here, were provided for alterations to diagrams, routes and train workings. Around 300 employees worked at Immingham Depot during this time. In charge of the operating departments was Colin Palmer, the area manager, seen here standing on the left. In charge of locomotive workshops and carriage wagon engineers was Stuart Bonner, the traction and rolling stock manager, seen here standing on the right. This building had very large windows and was handy for staff to view the arrival of an engine they were waiting for. Behind the building on the other side of engine line is the administration building for staff employed by the area manager. As we enter through the doors of the main entrance, we are met with a Star of the East sign and Secretary Betty Mackay. Jeff Stothard, an operating manager, is on the telephone. This corridor ran through the centre of the building. The doors allowed entry to offices for operating managers and operating departments. This, the largest room, is the main administration office. It was full of clerical staff dealing with the running of the railways. These people provided operating staff with uniforms, store items, daily rosters, wages, train diagrams and numerous other requirements. Line managers dealt with operating incidents, discipline, safety and sickness records, rules and regulation compliance and a great many other operating issues. Operating clerk Tracy Ibbotson seemed to be enjoying her day at work. Our next stop is Immingham Reception Sidings Signal Box. It was opened by the Great Central Railway Company on the 6th of October 1912. In the 1980s, the box was painted in the blue and white colours of Associated British Ports. This is the signalman's view of the main goods lines, looking towards Immingham East Junction. Ever since the railways built the dock, Reception Sidings was Immingham's main yard for forming trains of mixed goods. Since the introduction of block-load trains, however, siding lines have been removed and a considerable amount of shunting movements reduced. This is Reception Siding Pilot Engine number 1. It was making a shunting move, travelling from number 3 siding line into the shunt spur behind the shunting disc signal. The signalman was to change the points to allow the pilot into sorting sidings A. At the eastern end of the sidings, coal premises under the control of Coal Products Limited opened for business unloading HAA wagons of coal having arrived by train from South Wales. The empty HAA wagons you can see were waiting to be formed into trains for departure. Other types of wagons in view, including 100-ton oil tank wagons, were waiting to be formed into trains for departure for places such as Leeds and local area trips. In this view, Immingham Reception Siding Signal Box can be seen in the distance. The National Coal Board terminal, seen here, had remained unused since the miners' strike in 1984. This engine from Immingham Locomotive Depot is travelling on the down main goods line heading towards Humber Road Junction on its way to work in an oil train from one of the refineries.
Hello. That's it. Correct. Right, all right.
On the day I visited the signal box, resident signalman Roger Wand was on duty. The box was the busiest in Immingham and signalled trains between Ulsby Junction and the signal boxes on the dock estate.
Yes, all right. Right up.
Humber Road, however, was the busiest junction at Immingham and was controlled by a reception siding signalman. Here we see an empty iron ore train hauled by two Class 37 engines passing over Humber Road Junction, having arrived from Santon via Ulsby on its way to Immingham Bulk Terminal. The rail bridge spans a road for motor vehicles. The highway is known as Humber Road and leads from the busy A180 towards the western entrance of Immingham Dock. An 08 travelling pilot engine can be seen hauling a train load of 45-ton wagons from Lindsey Oil Refinery to Immingham reception sidings. This view from the top of the bridge shows Humber Road Junction at rail level. The line to the right of the stop blocks, seen here, is the bi-directional line towards Immingham reception. To the left of the stop blocks are the inward and outward lines of the National Coal Board Terminal. This was the position of Humber Road Junction signal box, which had operated since the 24th of June 1912. However, during alterations to the junction during the 1960s, the box was closed and demolished. Here we see two Class 37s hauling a loaded iron ore train from Immingham Bulk Terminal on its way to Scunthorpe Steelworks at Santon. As the train crosses over the bridge towards Ulsby Junction, it passes the train we saw earlier in the film heading towards Norse Hydro. Back inside the signal box, Roger receives a signal for yet another light engine from Brian Gold at East Junction. This is the NX panel for signalling trains between Humber Road and Ulsby Junction. The panel's diagram shows the two main lines running through the middle. Lindsey Oil Refinery's connections are at the bottom and Humber Oil Refinery's connections are at the top. As seen from Eastfield Road Bridge, this is Humber Oil Refinery, also known as Conoco Phillips. This view, looking towards Humber Road, is of the two main lines and the railway sidings inside the refinery. One of Conoco's locomotives stands in the head shunt. On the left are the departure tracks. However, the third track from the left is a through road. The three lines on the right are the arrival lines. This is a train of discharged 100-ton tank wagons heading towards Lindsey Oil Refinery. To end the film, we attend another charity event held by the area manager. The singer, Paul Bristow, was a senior railman at Immingham administration offices, and the people seen in the film are all railway employees.